Great lawyers don't always know how to build great law firms. Let's change that. Join Ben Gideon as he shares hard-won lessons from building his own financially successful law firm and practical insights from top law firm entrepreneurs, business consultants, and more. This is a podcast for lawyers, by lawyers. Welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. Produced and powered by Law Pods.
Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm is sponsored by Supio. Supio is a cutting-edge AI program designed specifically for plaintiff trial lawyers. I have to say, I did their demo just the other day. It is a fantastic product. It does so many things well, but one of the things I was just blown away with is the way it creates medical bill summaries that have been the bane of the existence of paralegals and plaintiffs' firms for decades. It does it in seconds. It's able to identify every bill from every provider, organize it, and then identify records where there's a bill but no record, and it can keep that going throughout the life of the case. It can do a million other things, which we'll talk about as we go forward, but you should get on Supio. They just got their Series B funding. They've got 60 plus employees. It's a great business, and get on and do the demo and see what they can do for you if you're in a plaintiff's practice. We're also brought to you by Vision Spark. Vision Spark is the search firm that specializes in finding your law firm, someone like Jeff Wright. We used Vision Spark to find our COO, and I've got to tell you, it was an incredibly good process. So I can talk from the side of the business owner who's searching for a COO. What was the process like from your side, Jeff, as the person being recruited?
It was thorough. It was. I felt at times I was being interrogated, and it was a long process, but it was probably the most thorough process I've been through in my career. And their follow-up, even since I've been hired, we've had monthly calls, and they just want to follow up. And I think the way they put it was, we want to make sure we didn't sell you a bill of goods, Jeff. We want to make sure everything we told you was correct, that it was a good fit. What made it a good fit? What did we do right? What did we do wrong? And I think you couldn't ask for more in a search firm.
Yeah, and I think, we obviously made the right choice in hiring you, but they found just an amazing pool of really top-notch candidates, which, you were the best of, Jeff, which speaks to you. But they found people we never could have located on our own, people from different states, people with extraordinarily interesting backgrounds. The expense was actually worth its weight in gold. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for an implementer or a COO, I think they can also do some other positions, but I would reach out and talk to the folks at Vision Spark. And finally, the podcast today is brought to you by 1% for Planet. Our firm, when we started, committed ourselves to joining 1% for Planet. 1% for Planet is an organization where members like ours commit to giving 1%, in our case, of all of our fee revenues to environmental nonprofit organizations. It's been a wonderful fit for us. We've probably contributed to 24 really great organizations that help preserve the environment, particularly in the northern New England states where we practice. It allows us opportunities to attend events like the one you just went to, Jeff.
Yeah, it's an organization down in southern Maine that is a refuge for injured wild animals, and they try and rehab them, and the ones that are unable to be rehabilitated to a point that they can go back to their natural environment, they house them there, and they use them as to teach classes and teach children. They've rescued somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 injured wild animals in the last 5 to 7 years. It's an extraordinary organization.
Yeah, and it's just so great to be able to support all these organizations. And when you are a member of 1% for Planet, one of the cool things is you're authorized to use the 1% logo, and we do. It's on our it's part of our branding as a firm. It's on all of our digital marketing. It tends to be on our it's on our letterhead. I mean, when we submit a brief to the court, it's got the 1% for Planet logo on it. And I just think it's a nice thing to have your business associated with something positive like that, to send a message to the world that you are giving back. And we would encourage all law firms that have the means and interest to contact 1% for Planet and become members. And if you do that, please reach out to us and we will give you a plug on the show as a new 1% for Planet member.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. I'm Jeff Wright, Chief Operating Officer over at Gideon Asen, and I'm joined by our host, Ben Gideon, owner and partner. Morning, Ben.
Hey, Jeff.
How
Good
are
morning.
you? How you doing today?
I'm doing great. And just so the listeners know, you had a late night last night playing the role of Gustavo. What happened there?
So we had a focus group last night, and there are 3 defendants. So I was asked to play one of the attorneys for one of the defense teams, and I was the only one that received a verdict. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
You got a defense verdict. I would congratulate you, except our business model is to represent the plaintiff side. So
I understand.
You do see the problem there, don't you?
I do see the problem, and I think I can help you work on your case, Ben.
Yeah, I think you can. I heard your part of your presentation. I thought it was really great. And actually, it reminded me how important it is as lawyers to hear from people that are not in the middle of the weeds of the case, because sometimes we can lose perspective. We're too close to it. And also sometimes our legal training gets in the way because we kind of forget about common sense. I thought your arguments were really, really smart and just based on common sense logic that was hard to argue with. So
I enjoyed it, and I think being a layperson and not an attorney, I looked at it that if I were sitting on the jury, what would I want to hear? What could I understand in very simple terms? And I tried to lay it out with the facts of the case that I was privy to, and it worked in my favor, and hopefully it gave some ammunition to obviously you and the attorneys on how you might want to change your approach to that particular defendant.
So moving on to today's show, this is our really our first episode after our trailer where we kind of explained what we're going to be doing in this new podcast that we're launching. What I'd like to do for each episode at the very beginning is to let the listener know what we're going to cover, what topics we're going to cover in the episode. That way, if it's something that you're interested in, you can stick around. If it's something you feel like you already know or you already have covered, then maybe you want to move on to the next episode and deal with a different topic. So today, what we're going to cover is I want to talk a little bit about our personal journeys to where we are right now and building the firm to where we are in our current state. I want to cover what are the core sets of knowledge and skills you need to build a successful law firm if you're thinking about going into starting your own practice or you're at the beginning phases of doing that. And number 3, I want to talk about the difference between building a firm and building a firm that's designed for growth, because I think those are actually often mistaken, but very different tasks, very different ventures that require different sets of knowledge and skills. So let's move on to topic 1. And we'll talk a little bit about our personal journeys that bring us here today, because probably helpful for people who are going to listen to this to know where we're coming from and what our perspective is and what our base of knowledge is that allows us to know something about the subject matter of building and growing a law firm, but also understand what our limitations are in that regard and where we also are looking to supplement our own knowledge as we will moving forward with this podcast. So,
yeah, I think it's a good idea if you go first on that one, Ben, with your significant background and how you came to start this firm and where you are now, 4 or 5 years after the fact.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into enormous detail on each item of the biography. It's not necessary, but I, like every lawyer, went to law school. I went to Yale Law School and graduated in 1999. At the time I went to law school, like probably most lawyers, I did not have a career mapped out in terms of what I planned to do. If you had asked me whether I would have ended up in the state of Maine doing plaintiff's personal injury, medical malpractice, trial law, I would have said you're kidding. I mean, that would have been the farthest thing from my mind in terms of what I would have been planning to do. If you had asked me whether I would have expected someday to go into business on my own, starting a law firm, I would have said no way. I had no plans for that, no interest in that at that point in my career. Mainly, I was just looking to get a job somewhere to figure out what practice of law was all about, to see whether I liked it, and to kind of find my way. So I went from there. I did a 1-year clerkship with a federal judge whose chambers are up in the state of Maine, a great judge who sits on the First Circuit Court of Appeals, which hears cases in Boston. And a very intense year, honed my writing skills, learned a lot of analytical thinking and how to put together arguments and cases, and great experience, but actually happy to see it come to an end after a year because being a clerk is also very isolating. Phone doesn't ring. You're not interacting with other humans really, except your co-clerks and the judge. And so moved on from there to accept a job as in the litigation department of Latham and Watkins in their Manhattan office. Latham and Watkins at that time was one of the top, I want to say, probably 5 largest law firms in the world, with thousands of lawyers across dozens of offices. And I had a really good experience there. I worked with some great partners who I became friendly with and really enjoyed working for. I learned a lot of valuable skills in terms of how to do really high quality legal work, write briefs, do legal research, do discovery. I got to work on some really interesting and high profile cases. I was working on the Enron case, which you may recall, the energy company from Texas that imploded. We represented Arthur Andersen, which was their outside accounting firm. I did a bunch of securities litigation. One of the cases I did involved going all over the country and interviewing people in a case where there was suspected internal fraud within the company, and we interviewed all of the chief executive officers and financial people, and ended up finding some accounting irregularities and presenting it to the audit committee. I represented Nintendo in a bunch of trademark and copyright cases that were really fascinating, involving mostly their Pokemon franchise.
It's quite a lucrative franchise.
It is. It actually is a pretty lucrative franchise. One of the cases was really fascinating. It was brought by the celebrity psychic, this guy named Uri Geller, who alleged that that the psychic Pokemon character was infringing on his likeness because the character was named Yungalar, which he said was a takeoff on Uri Geller, and it was depicted with a bent spoon, which was kind of Uri Geller's trademark. He would bend spoons with his mind. So we flew out to Beverly Hills and took Uri Geller's deposition. And I have to say that it's the only time my wedding ring has come off my finger. It slipped off in the bathroom sink. So I kind of think Geller might have been using his mind tricks on me. So I also did some great pro bono work there, represented client in a death row case, a guy on death row in Texas, and we actually got him exonerated and acquitted and released from death row after being on death row for probably in the realm of about 20 years. So I got to do some really, really interesting and cool stuff at Latham, but ultimately decided big law firm life wasn't where I wanted to hang my hat for my long-term career. There just wasn't enough opportunity to represent real humans, to get into a courtroom, to make an impact or a difference. And my wife and I had our first child living in New York City, and then 9/11 hit. We were in New York City during 9/11, had to evacuate our building, and just occurred to us that maybe New York City wasn't the best place to be raising our new family. That all culminated when one of the roommates of the in the apartment above us murdered his roommate in the apartment building. And I came home and there were police cars all up and down our street in front of the building. And our son was about 3 months old at the time. And I thought, oh shit, something really bad happened involving my wife or son, and ran in there and found out it didn't involve them. But then it occurred to me, maybe we should get out of New York City. So we did, moved back to Maine. And then I worked for the largest and most successful plaintiffs firm in Maine. I was there for 17 years, became an owner and a partner, and served on their management committee, helping to manage the firm. And in that capacity, really got a lot of insight into what goes into running and managing a fairly good-sized and successful law firm. That firm had about 17 lawyers, give or take, and vacillated in the realm of around 40 non-lawyer staff. It was a firm founded in 1917, so it's been around over 100 years. And so that really gave me a lot of insight into firm management and firm strategy and growth. And then finally, the final chapter is in 2000, during the pandemic and during my wife's campaign for U.S. Senate, where she was the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate. I thought, well, life isn't already crazy and busy enough. I should leave my current stable job as a partner and owner at a successful law firm and start a new law firm practice.
Makes perfect sense.
So I recruited one of our associates there, Taylor Asen, to join me. And with Taylor and then one paralegal from that practice, we left. And toward the end of 2020, we opened our doors as a new law firm of Gideon Asen. So that brings us up to the start of the firm. And now the firm we're heading into ending up our 5th year. And so we'll get into detail in later episodes, but we started with very clear targets in terms of financial targets year to year. We've met our financial targets or exceeded them in each year. And I will say, from year one, our financial targets were for 7-figure revenues. So we knew we needed to, generate substantial revenue. And we did so starting year one, and that has increased, in the realm of 100% or more every year to the present year, to the point now where in our 5th year, we're hoping to exceed 8 figures in fee revenues, and we have a game plan that should allow us to do that. So in the meantime, we have grown our firm from the initial 2 lawyers and 1 paralegal to having, I think we're up to 6 lawyers now and 10 non-lawyer staff. with a plan to continue growing over the course of the next several years. So through that journey of starting a firm and building this firm, I feel like we've done a lot of things right. We've made a lot of mistakes that we've learned from. And part of the concept behind this podcast was to share what we've learned, to share what mistakes we've made that hopefully others can learn from and avoid making the same mistakes. And then look forward to where we're heading from here, and what things we need to implement to get from where we are today to where we want to be 4 years from now. So that's a great segue to me introducing you, Jeff, because you're a big part of the next phase and our plan and vision for our future. So we got to the point where we determined that in order to get where we wanted to be as a firm, we no longer could have the lawyers manage the day-to-day operations of the firm, that we needed to be delegating that responsibility to someone who had experience managing, who had interest in learning and doing this role, and had the different skill sets that are needed to help a business grow. So we landed on you after a pretty extensive and robust search process to locate someone to do that job. So why don't you now share a little bit about your own background and journey that brings you here today?
Geez, Ben, I should have gone first. I mean, you got Pokemon, you got murders in your building, you got psychics bending spoons. I can't compete with that. I'm going to bore the hell out of everyone. So I've been here for 5 months now, actually, as of this past Friday. My background, I guess, originally, my plan was I wanted to save the world. I got involved in the social services side. I worked with a number of different clients that, I started with physically and sexually abused children. Then I moved on to MR and autistic, and then I moved on to traumatic brain injuries. My boss at the time thought I should go back to school and become a hospital administrator. And I quickly learned that even though I enjoyed that field, I could not see myself making a career out of it. So I made a pretty quick career change early on. I think I was maybe 24 years old at the time. And 6 months after I made that decision, I was a financial consultant at Smith Barney. And it was back in the days when Smith Barney was part of Citigroup. So it was Citibank, Travelers Insurance, Smith Barney. I was privileged, and I say that tongue in cheek, to be there during the dot-com meltdown when the stock market decided to crash. So that was a really good initiation into the finance world. I transitioned from there into the banking world and was in banking for the last 20 plus years. My last job was as a chief operating officer at a good-sized community bank. And I was brought there in that role to merge two $500 million banks into a $1 billion bank, which wound up being about an 18-month project. And again, got to a point where I wanted something different. I'd run my course in the banking world. The next logical step was to step into a CEO role. I've always been more of a behind-the-scenes person. I don't want to be out front kissing babies and handing out checks. It's not my personality, as Ben has probably figured out since he knows me. I like to call myself more of a kingmaker than a king. And I started looking, and I saw this opportunity, and I said, boy, that sounds interesting, but they're probably looking for an attorney. They're probably looking for somebody with legal background. But I said, what's the worst that can happen? They could say no. And I applied, went through, like Ben said, a very rigorous process, multiple interviews, multiple psychological evaluations with the recruiter. Somehow I passed those. And, I was able to join the firm, and come to find out, and speaking with Ben and Taylor, they weren't looking for someone with legal experience. They wanted somebody with business experience. They wanted somebody that could manage people, that could manage growth, that could handle operations and the day to day. And I think in the first 5 months, it couldn't be a better fit between us. So I'm thrilled to be here and be part of this journey, and for us to share this journey with everyone.
And I have to say, I mean, no one is happier about it than we are, because we didn't realize how much we needed you. We did, but we didn't until you came, and now we know just what a game-changing difference it is to have somebody with your set of skills and background and personality. And it's when you tell your story about your background, it reminds me that one of the things that distinguished you in our mind was because, you think, well, banking, it's kind of cold and calculating. And it seems like really the diametric opposite to representing people in cases like we do. And, but when you talked about, as you did in your interview, your background in social services, and we recognize that your value system was very much aligned with ours, even though you've been in a different industry. I think that's a good lesson, that you can't always judge a book by it's cover, and you probably find people in every industry that have value systems that align with yours. And so so it was a really great fit. And I also love the fact that you are doing the administrative stuff and operational things that need to be done to help grow our firm, but you're also really interested in the substantive elements of the work we do. For instance, participating in the focus group last night. And you've actually observed many of our focus groups where, that's not part of your job description. You don't need to be sitting there online from 5 to 9 p.m. watching focus groups to do your job, but you clearly have a real interest in our clients and our mission well beyond just the operational elements. So,
yeah, no, 100%. And kind of like you had a preconceived notion about bankers, I had a little preconceived notion about attorneys. I mean, I expected 3-piece suit, stuffy, arrogant, and it's quite the opposite. I mean, a little bit of arrogance there, but it was quite the opposite. And I'm glad both of us were able to squash those preconceived notions we had of each other.
We could actually improve our dress code a little bit. I think that the 3-piece suit may be a thing of the past, but it'd be nice for people to, tuck in their shirts and not wear, stained T-shirts to work every day too.
It would be. We'll have to talk about that offline.
Yeah. Now, okay, so we've covered topic one, our journey. I think, though, for takeaway from that for our listeners, that between us, we have acquired a fair amount of experience, knowledge, and wisdom managing and running law firms and in the business sector that we hope will be valuable to you in sharing some of our ideas as we go forward. We also don't claim to know everything, and that's why as we move forward, we will also be supplementing with many guests, consultants, experts in different industries who selfishly we need to learn from to help us on our next phase of growth. So let's move on to topic two. And the topic here is, what knowledge and skill set do you need in order to build a law firm? And I've been giving a lot of thought to that. And I think that there's some amount of misinformation maybe that goes into that or kind of myths that need to be debunked a little bit. So here's my take on that. So the conventional wisdom, which I have to say has been referenced in the kind of trailer and promo for our own show, which maybe we need to change or fix at some point, is that, well, lawyers are good at practicing law. We're not trained as business people. So therefore, being a lawyer doesn't really give you the necessary background or skill set to run a successful business. But then you think about the data out there, which is that in America today, there are something like 400,000 law firm businesses. And when you hear the data on the success rate of new business startups, the percentage of business startups that fail over the course of the first 5 years is very high. It's something like 75% of new businesses, and I don't quote me on that, but that's roughly accurate, fail in their first 5 years. And that statistic, I believe, does not apply to law firms. And so then you'd think, well, if lawyers are such bad business people, why aren't they failing at the same rate as other small businesses fail? Because I think the reality is they don't. And we all know many solo practitioners or small practices of just a couple partners that started and are still going strong 10, 20, 30 years later. Go to any small town in America, you're going to find numerous, law firms on Main Street that look just like that, and they're doing reasonably well. So this is where I think there's an important distinction to be made in terms of what the law firm business you plan to start and grow is. The reality of law firms is that a law firm is an established business model with an established market that is proven and known to exist. So when you start a law firm, it's not like starting a startup company where you're developing a new service or a new product that is untested in the marketplace. And you need to determine, okay, well, is there a customer for this service? Is there a customer that's willing to spend money to buy this service? That doesn't apply to law firms because the law firm business model is very well tested, tried, and proven over decades, if not hundreds of years. There's a book that I recently read called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and he has a definition of a startup business. And he defines a startup as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. State that again, a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So that's how he defines a startup business. And there's a whole new kind of thinking about how one should approach a startup business to maximize the success, or probably better stated, to reduce the failure rate of that type of a business. And we'll be getting into some elements of that as we move forward. But that definition of a startup business, Reese contrasts against a traditional business that seeks to simply replicate an existing business model, but does not seek to create a new product or service. So clearly, by that definition, a law firm is not a startup business. It's not seeking to design a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. What it is if you are attempting to provide legal services in the context of a business that you want to start and own, which you're going to call a law firm, that is a proven business model that there is an established customer base for, no matter what type of legal services you're intending to provide, whether it's in our case plaintiffs, medical malpractice, personal injury work, or you're doing an immigration practice, you're doing criminal defense practice, you're doing a corporate or business litigation, or drafting wills and trusts. All of those are established, proven business models for which there is a market that is known for services. So unlike a traditional, tech startup, for example, where there's high uncertainty, when you're starting a law firm, you just need to execute. You don't need to develop a new plan or business model. You don't need to determine if there's a marketplace for that service. And of course, the whole legal system of carefully providing gatekeeping for entry into the marketplace, requiring most lawyers to go to law school, requiring lawyers to first pass the bar examination, preventing lawyers from other states from coming to your state if they haven't passed the bar exam in your state. There are enough barriers to entry that it keeps the supply side of lawyers down. And in many rural parts of America, there are not enough lawyers to meet the demands of the consumer. So again, you can be successful starting a law firm if you can execute on a plan and you can practice you can provide competent legal services. You don't need any more than that at a baseline to be successful. And so I think for those that, let's say you're about to graduate law school or you're a couple of years out and you want to design your future career to own your own business, to be able to make a good living that can feed your family and put food on the table and be satisfying and allow you to have good connections in your local community. You can accomplish all of that without great uncertainty, without reinventing the wheel, simply by being disciplined at executing a simple plan to start a business and to provide competent legal services. And just as evidence of that, that's done every day in America. And many, many lawyers have succeeded with that model without having an MBA from Harvard Business School, without listening to a podcast like this one, without having fancy consultants, without having a COO like Jeff Wright with a background in business. You don't need any of that to be successful at that level. So let me tell you what skills you already have that will make you successful at that, if that's where you choose to go in your career. If you apply the skills that you use in practicing law and handling the problems that come before you in each case with each client, you already have the skill set you need in order to execute on starting a small practice and making a living, having your own law firm. And I think about how we approach problems, but they're the same way we approach the problems that the clients come to us with in a case, right? They come to us as lawyers. We are there to be problem solvers. People present us with a specific problem, and we have to, first of all, identify what are the key issues that need to be addressed. We look at what is the legal landscape, the factual landscape, the practical considerations that need to go into that, potentially the budget that a client may have to allow you to solve their problem. We come up with a game plan in terms of how we're going to recommend doing so, and then we execute on that plan. And in the course of that process, again, depending on the budget and the resources we have and the extent of the issue, we have to acquire additional knowledge and skills or outsource aspects of that task to others that can assist us with those cases. So that may require talking to mentors or other lawyers who can help us with advice. It may require us to reach out to experts in a particular field who can testify or can assist us in aspects of putting that, solving the problem for our client. We obviously have to know the rules of the game. We need to know the legal landscape and where are the points of leverage and where are the potential pitfalls. We have to develop a game plan, but we have to be nimble and continually revise that plan as things change, as you go forward, if new facts emerge, new problems come to light, and we can't be afraid to change course if what we're doing isn't working. We have to manage and budget resources, both our own time, the time of any other lawyers or paralegals that may be tasked to work on the case. And we have to have a management system in place to hold anybody else who's involved in working on that issue accountable to make sure they're doing the work and they're doing it at a high level that allows us to be successful. So that's what we do as lawyers. That's there in running a business at a baseline level. That's all you need to do. All of those same skill sets applied to the task of opening, building, and running a law firm. If you follow that approach, you will be successful. The specific issues are going to be different. The things you need to learn are going to be different. Maybe the experts or mentors you need to locate and rely upon will be different. But the actual process is something you already know how to do as a lawyer. It's solving problems. It's confronting and addressing issues, developing plans, and implementing and managing. And that's something you already do every day. So, and I think that explains why many lawyers are able to start firms and be very successful and have really great careers running and managing a law firm, because they do have the skill set necessary to do that. Again, doesn't require the Harvard MBA, doesn't require you to be Bill Gates or Elon Musk, just requires you to be thoughtful, deliberate, and continually learning as you move forward in your career. So that's my take on the what it takes to start a law firm. But and I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeff, just for your thoughts about it. But what I'm describing right now is a limited venture. It's starting a law firm where the goal of the firm is to allow you a platform to sell your own legal services, or potentially the legal services of yourself and maybe one or two partners or one or two associates. So the firm is not intended to grow and to achieve additional profitability and revenue based on being run as a business. The firm is intended solely as a platform for you to sell your own services predominantly and to achieve revenue based on selling your legal services. So that's what I call a law firm that sells your legal services, but is not a growth firm. Because when you talk about a growth firm, that I think the everything I just said changes quite dramatically, because they are very, very different animals. One is an entrepreneurial business, that's a growth firm. And the other is simply a platform where you are, rather than working at somebody else's firm, you simply have created a structure, a legal structure, a law firm, to sell your own legal services. It really isn't that different from you being a lawyer in somebody else's small law firm. And so I think when there's a discussion about, well, what does it take to start a law firm? What kind of skill set do you need? How do you succeed at that? That question, the answer to that question really depends a lot on first defining what kind of law firm you want to build. If you just want to have a platform to sell your own legal services, you already have the skill sets you need to do that. You just need to follow that, be disciplined, and implement. When it comes to the other animal, which is what the rest of this podcast is really going to be about, starting now, there's a lot more to it. So does that, now you haven't, if we were just if I was just Ben Gideon with one paralegal and a legal assistant, a solo practitioner selling my own legal services, and I could make a very good living doing that if that's what I chose to do, Jeff. Obviously, we would never have gotten to the place where we were hiring you. You wouldn't be necessary for that kind of a project. But does that distinction make sense to you if you're thinking kind of structurally about what we're talking about here?
Oh, it 100% resonates. And I think your point is so well put, is you're not recreating the wheel. If someone just wants a platform, like you said, to provide their legal services, they already have the skills. They could do it tomorrow if they have, enough economic means to go on their own, period. What enticed me about this and what I'm excited about being here and also about this podcast is the vision that our firm has that we're going to relay and that we're in the middle of implementing now is that growth aspect that goes well beyond just that initial skill set. And not every attorney has the chops or the desire or the willingness, pick the appropriate term, to be able to do what we're trying to do. And it's going to be a journey, not only on this podcast, but almost in real time, that, everyone listening to this is going to hear about our true, almost up to the minute trials and tribulations of what we're going through trying to build a growth law firm. And my guess is, Ben, when you left, your previous firms, your mindset wasn't, I can just do the same thing. I think your mindset was, yeah, the foundation is there. I'm not only going to do it better, I'm going to do it different. And I think it's those differences that is really going to set it apart from other firms and propel the growth. And I'm excited for it.
Need help on a complex personal injury or medical malpractice case? Gideon Asen accepts case referrals and regularly co-counsels with lawyers nationwide on high-value claims. The firm has recovered millions of dollars in cases that competitors turned away because they dig deeper. Ready to learn more? Email bgideon@gideonasenlaw.com to start the conversation. Gideon Asen shares fees as permitted by the laws of each state. Don't let complex cases overwhelm your practice. Elevate justice together with Gideon Asen.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I recognized at my old firm is there's when you are practicing law in somebody else's firm, even though I had an equity ownership in it, and many partners in firms do, there is an inherent ceiling in most instances on where you can go with that, because you don't own all of the equity or the majority of the equity in the business. And there is, because the equity is dispersed and nobody is getting a disproportionate share of that, it creates a perverse incentive for implementing a growth model that would allow the lawyers to make money off of the business as opposed to each lawyer's individual contributions through their own legal services. Right? Because if that money you're making from the business has to be dispersed among, 8, 10, 20 partners, each partner is only getting a tiny fraction of that. Well, why are you going to put in all of the time and effort that's required to build that out for a tiny fraction of that return? Whereas when you own your own firm and you can take that, you get all of that or a large percentage of that. Now there's an incentive to build a business that can generate money outside of just what your individual, provision of legal services can accomplish, because you're benefiting disproportionately from that. And so that was part of my rationale for leaving my prior firm, was wanting to, particularly as I grew older, and you think about the toil that the day-to-day practice of law places on you and the stress that it places, it's nice to think that your income is not solely derived from the hours that you're putting in or the cases you're resolving, but you're building something bigger than that. And it's also fun. I mean, I've really enjoyed that challenge. So in the last section today, let's talk about topic 3, which is this difference of what it means to build a growth law firm, and what different skill sets or knowledge or experience are required for that. So just so going forward, we can be on the same page in terms of what we're talking about here. And the firm where you're hanging a shingle and you're a solo practitioner, a couple lawyers, and you've created a platform to sell your own legal services. The successful business model for that is keep your overhead low and keep most of what you make, so that because there's going to be real upside limitations in what you can generate for revenue. Either if you have an hourly rate practice, it's simply a function of the number of hours that you and your team have to sell, or if it's a contingent fee practice like ours, it's a function of how many cases you can resolve with the limited number of personnel that you have. In order for that to work, you really do need to keep your overhead low. You have to be very nimble. And that also comes with limitations about what kind of cases you can take on, because there are significant matters, no matter what your field that you're in, that requires substantial investment of time and resources and personnel, that if you're doing that business model, you're not going to be able to compete with those for those kind of cases. That's why Latham and Watkins and Cravath and White and Case and the big firms exist, right? I mean, no Fortune 100 company is probably going to hire the solo practitioner with one paralegal and one legal assistant to handle a significant matter, whether that's a corporate transaction or a litigated matter or anything else. So you're going to know what your niche market is in terms of types of case. That's going to be your bread and butter. You're going to keep your overhead low, keep an eye on your profit margin, and you should be able to have a good business like that, predictable and consistent relatively year over year. But there's going to be a real ceiling to where that can go. Now, yeah.
Ben, when you talk about that, you make it sound very boring and mundane. Is that just because that's not your vision of going out on your own?
Well, I think there's a way in which it is. I mean, it's
predictable.
The model is intended to be boring and mundane, which is a trade-off for being predictable and low risk. However, I think, and I know many solos and small lawyer practitioners who absolutely love their jobs. And there's many times I feel envious and jealous of that, because a lot of times these are folks that are just pillars of their local community. They have great relationships with the local institutions, maybe some institutional clients. They're able to spend time with their clients, really get to know people, often volunteer in the community. And I know lawyers who do that practice who make, multiple six-figure salaries year in and year out, and in particularly small towns and rural states. It can be a wonderful quality of life and a wonderful practice. So I guess it's boring in terms of the business model. It doesn't have to be boring in terms of the day-to-day. I mean, if you're doing a criminal defense practice, every case you have is probably pretty fascinating. And any practice that involves human interaction, you're involved in people telling stories. So it really can be it can be, I think, a great option. And I think probably too few lawyers go that route because they may be enticed by the big city or big practices or the high starting salaries or other things. But it's a great potential career choice, I think. However, it isn't really what I want to talk about in the podcast because there's not much to talk about. I mean, we've covered everything. You can get down to nitty gritty, like where should you buy your malpractice coverage, and what phone service should you. But that's boring stuff.
Yeah.
The reality is, it's just there's not that much to talk about, and it's not where I want to spend our energy. And frankly, if that's your business, maybe there isn't that much you're going to gain from this because we're going to be talking about a growth model law firm and what goes into that. So
unless it's their business, but they want to change that. And
Sure,
how do they not only, I think it's twofold. It's one, someone looking to leave their current firm that they're at and go out on their own, but also maybe someone who has that sole practitioner, that sole practice that is in the groove, is doing fine, but wants to take it to the next level, the growth level, and doesn't know how.
100%. Yeah. I think those are the market for our podcast, or people that are embarked on the journey of building a growth law firm. Any of those will be well served by this podcast and the information we're hoping to cover and exchange of ideas here. All I'm saying is if you're somebody who has a wonderful practice, you and one partner, small town, great reputation, solid business model with good profit margin, overhead low, and there's no reason you need to change that at all.
Enjoy it.
And enjoy it, and spend your time doing the things you love. So, my point is, I didn't mean to belittle or diminish that at all. I think that's a really potentially great career choice. So in terms of the growth model law firm, just for definitional purposes, how I'm defining that is a law firm that enables the owners and founders to earn money beyond what they could achieve just by selling their own legal services. A growth law firm is one where you're investing capital to develop the firm's brand, to engage in marketing, B2B marketing, so to businesses if you serve institutional clients, or other lawyers if you have a referral-based practice. Also marketing to former clients, to the general public, with the goal of increasing the number of valuable case assets that your firm has. Because in order to grow, you need to be acquiring additional cases that can generate revenue. That goes without saying. Whereas, if you have a static business model, you can just plateau at a certain number of cases that can be handled effectively by the small team you have, but you are not looking to grow. In fact, if you grow in that model, you're going to outstrip your capabilities, and your quality of your legal service is going to go down, and it's going to damage your reputation, and then you're not going to do as well. So definitionally, a growth firm needs to increase its case assets, and there are different ways that can happen. We're going to talk about that in the podcast going forward. A growth firm has to manage those case assets with the support not only of you personally as the owners and founders, but of other personnel, and very importantly, developed proprietary systems that you create for your law firm that can allow it to efficiently manage those case assets to achieve high quality legal services for your clients at the lowest possible expenditure of personnel and costs. And a part of that today is the use of technology. So we'll be talking about that. You will be reinvesting your revenues, or a portion of them, in order to spurn that cycle of growth. So rather than having a static model where you're taking out, the profits go to the partners at the end of each year, you have to assume that in order for that growth model to be successful, some of that has to be reinvested both in the case acquisition and also in the personnel and systems needed to process and manage those cases effectively. Advantages of a growth model law firm is that you no longer are limited in terms of your upside to what you can sell for your own hours or your own time. You can build something that has intrinsic value that's greater than yourself. And ideally, although it hasn't yet applied to me, you can build something that can run without you present or working every waking minute of every day so that you can have other focuses of your energies and lifestyle. I know things that I would enjoy doing more kind of on a professional front are teaching, writing, speaking. So I would like to get it to a point where more of my time gets to be spent doing that kind of thing. And obviously personal time, recreation, outdoor stuff, the stuff I love doing. So we'll get there. Yeah. So that's the advantages. The disadvantages are that, and now we get back to the conventional wisdom and myth, that when they say lawyers have to be careful about building and growing law firms because lawyers are not business people, this is what they mean by that. Lawyers are not entrepreneurs that are knowledgeable or skilled in what it takes to build a growth model law firm. And all the things I said earlier about how you can translate the practice of law into running a business applies to the non-growth type of law firm. It does to some extent also apply to the growth model law firm, but it doesn't get you all the way that you need to be. It's a starting point, but not enough. And that's the disadvantages. Now you're taking on, going back to the definition of a startup, a law firm, even a growth model, is still not a startup because it is an established business model. However, being an entrepreneur and seeking to grow now does multiply the risks. So the risk of failure becomes much higher because now you have to ensure you have adequate cash flow. You have to have adequate management systems to manage more personnel and deal with more problems. And I just want to kind of end on this note, and this is going to be kind of a theme going forward. But I just want to give some insight into what my process has been in order to supplement my own knowledge and skill set, recognizing that although I have the problem-solving skills that come from being a lawyer and the analytical skills, I did not have and still do not have all of the substantive knowledge and expertise needed to build a growth law firm. So what I do is I try to find people that could be mentors or have skill sets that I don't possess. And Jeff, you're an example of one of them. I read and listen extensively to anything I can find that talks about the issues that we're confronting as a firm. And my process is that I like to listen to audiobooks and podcasts as I walk, typically with my dogs. And I have my notes application up and running. And as I'm doing and listening, my mind is carefully thinking about our own business. And I'm trying to translate the lessons that I'm hearing in whatever the book I'm reading or listening to or the podcast into our own business. So my mind is actively working all the time, thinking about it. And then I am dictating into the notes app as I'm going ideas. I have probably hundreds of pages of notes from maybe 50 books and podcasts now that go through the ideas. A lot of them are things that come directly out of the book or podcast, and other things are things that it triggers an idea for our own business. And then we implement those strategically. We don't read a book and do everything that it recommends, but for each book, there might be a couple strategic things we implement. But that starts to add up over time. And this is probably a good way for me to end today, that I think that as you're embarking on this journey of building your growth law firm, the number one most important factor is to continue learning something new every single day, to get at least one new idea, to give thought to one new system or innovation that you can implement, and to constantly be thinking about it, constantly being open-minded to new approaches, to revisiting, reconsidering, and learning every single day and acquiring more knowledge and skill. And to me, that's the part I've loved the most about this, because I feel like even though I'm 53 years old, and in a lot of ways, practicing law for 20 plus years, it had gotten a little bit stale, a little bit old. I've gotten pretty good about, how to do the cases. But this is brand new to me, the business side of building a law firm. And I'm thoroughly enjoying learning every day, including learning from you, Jeff. So for me, that will wrap it up for today. A good way to transition to our next show. But thoughts, takeaways?
I'm in the middle of the journey and I'm excited to go on it. And I'll just reiterate what you're saying. I mean, invigorating is the word I would use, learning something new every day, us trying to implement something, us seeing the fruits of our labor when we have our meetings and our wrap-ups and look at what we've accomplished. And, there's a lot of smart people here. And, I've always been a big proponent of, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. It's going to be the best decision you ever make. And I've certainly done that. And you're smart enough to know when we need to reach for outside help and use an expert or use a third party. And these are all skills that, you've learned over the years. And if someone is looking to build a growth law firm, these are all skills they're going to have. So this is going to be an exciting journey.
Agreed. Looking forward to it.
All right. Hope everyone has a good day.
Thanks for listening to Elevate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm. Share with colleagues if you found it valuable. Remember, building a successful law firm takes discipline, strategy, and determination. But you're not alone. Produced and powered by LawPods.